weakness, but how to revel in your? Revel in your? And now, if I must revel in my strength, I won't be able to do this. Because as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we are live streaming once again. So just remind me, Karenzo, not to pick my nose or to say something untoward. Just show me the sign, darling. Show me the sign. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the WCD, today we don't have our FET colleagues with us. We do understand that they had other business to attend to in their CSF, but what a wonderful occasion it is. Allow me then to welcome all district directors, if any are present. I'd like to welcome the heads of curriculum. What a wise choice that you've made to stay here for day 2. I feel the energy, I feel the passion. No guilt, trauma, absolute. We put our toes in the water and our bums in the sand, Jenny, isn't that? So have a wonderful time. Welcome to the DCSs of every district, the GT coordinators, foundation phase, to our CESs of head office, Mr. Peck, as well as Mrs. Dutoy, Ms. Christelle Barkhuizen, and to all the head office staff. I'm going to ask, and then, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very competent team that has put all of this together for us. And led by our concierge, Ms. Nolene Dodgen, and team, will you please stand? And could we give them a round of applause for acknowledgement of treating us like kings and queens? Where's Nolene's team? There's Antoinette. Give it up, baby. Take a bow. Own your space, take your space, be proud of your space. Am I correct, Jenny? There we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a jam-packed program for you this morning, one that's exciting. I see, for some reason, we've got a couple of empty seats. Now, I'm not sure, but ladies, I see a couple of handsome fellas in front here. It may not be my petties, but all the same, I can acknowledge that they are handsome. Now, some of you are saying, what the hell is she talking about? Come on now, you just got up, I just claimed my space. I'm just acting in my area of strength, am I not, Portia? So what I'm saying is we have some wonderful speakers in the house. We've got our family members like Dr. Ronald Cornelissen with us this morning. We have all the way as well, we've got Mr. Abbas Jamie Abbas, thank you for being here. You can see he's flanked by Nolene on one side. Check out the body language, girls. Anina on the other side, I can see he's sweating already. And he's telling himself, I'm here as a guest speaker. I hope my wife doesn't see this going live streaming. Too late, Jamie, I'm so sorry, darling. And then we also have now the open spaces I spoke about. I'm not sure if I should call the gents a little closer. Hussein, why are you so far back there, darling? Are you scared of Dr. Eve? She will suss you out. She's going to smell you out, darling. So if we can fill up some of the spaces here, as I said, we are live streaming, and so what a wonderful occasion for those who cannot be here, for teachers that afterwards you can also view on YouTube, and you can enjoy these wonderful, enriching, empowering sessions. Because as you give out so much of yourself, because we have servanthood leadership, we go out there, it's an honor, it's a privilege for us, ladies and gentlemen, to serve this province, to represent our province, that we walk, when we enter a school, we enter with our heads held high. We know we're there to support, we're there to nurture, and remember what the SG also said, that we need to use our discernment when we need to use punitive measures, because unfortunately we do have that. But that is not all that the WCD is all about. It's all about the year of the learner, quality education for every child, in every classroom, in every school in this province. And how do we do that? By changing our mindsets. So right now, I'm going to ask Liz to bring up the video for us. You're going to get up on your feet, and we are going to celebrate. You gotta be. Come on, rise, rise, rise. You know me, no lapel mics. Come on, up we get. Go on, come on, get up, get up. There we go. Come on, my babies. Wonderful. Let's enjoy the morning. Let's enjoy each other. Claim your space. Claim every moment. You a subject advisor. Come on, you gotta be strong, my darlings. You gotta be sexy. Claim it, claim it. Get up, get up, get up. I'm watching you there. Come on, up you get, up you get. Wonderful. Move it, move it.
To cry, you gotta be.
Woo, here we go. Western Cape, here we go.
You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, you gotta be stronger. You gotta be sing together. All I know, love will save the day. Harold, what your mother said, read the books your father read, trying to solve the puzzles in your own sweet time. Some may have more cash than you, others take a different view. My, oh my, eh, eh. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, you gotta be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, you gotta be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, you gotta stay together. All I know, love will save the day. Time asks no questions, it goes on without you, leaving you behind if you can't stand the pace. The world keeps on spinning, can't stop it if you try to. The best part is dangerous still
on,
in
darling.
pace.
Keep up the energy. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Whoa.
Come on, here we go. And
Remember, listen as your day unfolds.
Here we go,
Challenge what
lift
the
it up.
future holds. Trying to keep your head up to the sky.
come on, I can see your age. You're going from side to side. Move it. Lift them arms. Rise, rise, rise.
Eh, eh, eh. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, you gotta
Here we
be
go.
wiser.
Show the Western Cape.
You gotta be hard, you gotta be
Claim your
tough,
space.
you gotta be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, you gotta
Revel
stay
in your
together.
strength.
All I know,
Change your
love will save the
mindset.
day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, you gotta be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, you gotta be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, you gotta stay together. All I know, love will save the day. You got to be bold, you got
Woo!
to
Keep
be
it up. Ooh, en nou voel ek so maar so 'n bietjie sweet, Wayne. Vader, nou kom die ouderdom uit. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to tackle this day? Are you going to claim your space? Fabulous. Let's do this. Let's do this curriculum. Here we go. It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our very first speaker. He brings the joy of statistics to us. He brings the joy of research. He claims his space. He says to you, darlings, it's looking a bit gloom, but there's hope at the end of the day. I'm here. My name is Dr. Ronald Cornelissen. Just give it up, let him feel love, let him feel the love.
Good. After such a welcome, what must one do? Just to say that later on in the program, we have Dr. Marlene who will be talking about sexuality in language. Now, the way Karen introduced me is almost like we are making numbers look sexy. So today we will make the numbers look sexy, and I'll try my best to do that. Okay, we spoke about that yesterday, so I'm not going to reiterate what I've explained to the audience yesterday. It's also important that when we look at the numbers, it's also important that when we look at the numbers, just to get an understanding, when we look at the data set that we are doing, remember there's 250,000 learners that write language, 250,000 learners that write maths, same learners. So you have a data set of plus minus or between 550,000 learners in one data set. Each of them having a number of questions for language and for maths. So the rows is about 500,000 and the columns you have about 250 columns within the data set. And then from that, you need to work out what's the provincial results, what's the district results, what is the circuit results, what is the school's results, and what is the result for every learner for the following. The different concepts, of which there are about 30, the different learning areas, of which there are 5 and 5, how those learning areas did by quintile, how did they do by means of if there are no fee and a fee-paying school with your 5 different fee categories, as well as other stuff that sometimes districts ask as well. The 6th of December last year, by when was it, the 20th of January, all schools and districts must get their results. One person does all the statistics in the department. So you can understand what we have to go through, and therefore, to check whether all things are in order, we've sometimes put up what is known as a dummy data set, as what I explained. And that is what you sometimes got. And that is what districts received when they pulled down their information. And I do apologize for that, because sometimes now you have a misunderstanding of what your results are. But now you can understand the amount of work that's involved and the amount of sleep that person will get since the time you start with the data set until the time you end with the results. So you now know the amount of work. Now, I'm going to look at the grade 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the grade 3, what we did was we took the question paper of 2017 and we made changes in the maths paper. We took a number of grade 2 items and we changed them to grade 3. And that is done by a special service provider, which is called the Center for Evaluation and Assessment, which is the CEA, which is the University of Pretoria. And they are the people that does the TIMS, right, the Trends in International Mathematics Science Study, as well as the PEARLS, which is the international language. So they know what is expected of grade 3 learners and grade 6 learners. So when they set the paper, that is what we are looking at. But when it comes to Afrikaans and isiXhosa, we also sometimes ask our curriculum people to assist in the translations as well. Remember, when the CEA translate into isiXhosa, it is Johannesburg isiXhosa. When we bring it into Cape Town, we must have Cape Town or Western Cape isiXhosa. And then we ask our curriculum advisors in the isiXhosa section to go through the paper and make changes. And just to say that the changes are made to make it more acceptable, amenable to the students or to the learners when they answer. But what we also did last year is that we shifted the questions around. So question 1, the text, could now be question 3. Question 2 could be question 1, and question 3 could be question 2. So we switched the thing around. Now, when we did that for the grade 3, lo and behold, for the maths, we changed task 1 into task 2 and task 2 to task 1. And lo and behold, what we saw was that the results decreased. Now, some people will say the reason why the results decreased is because grade 3 learners does not understand changes or major changes within the paper. But the problem is these are new learners. So it couldn't affect those learners. So why do we have a decrease in the results? Is it because of the cohort? Is it because of whatever factors? And that is what you could come up with the answer. Okay, but just to say that there was a drop from 59.3 to 56.6%. Not sure if the grade 3 items that were brought in were more difficult, but remember, the number of items that were brought in was a maximum of 10 new grade 3 items. And the number of grade 2 items were taken out of the paper. So you have the same paper, the length as well. We look at language. We took out one text out of the language and replaced it, and we shifted the text around. Okay, yes, the new text that we did put in was a little bit more reading, bearing in mind that learners at grade 4 in the TIMS is tested and they need to read a maximum of 1 A4 page of text without pictures. So are our learners, and the text that we've given, they're not longer than a 3/4 A4 paper text. Some of them are even shorter, some of them is just that length. So that means we also speak of the reading ability and reading with understanding of our grade 3 learners. Now let's look at the language. We have 3 languages, isiXhosa, Afrikaans, and English. And we look at 2018, and we see how they have performed compared to 2017. English dropped by 5%. isiXhosa went up by 2%. So from last year to the year before, which was 2018, but if you look at Afrikaans, we dropped by 3%. And most of our learners are in the Afrikaans sector at this stage. If you look at the languages, we even find out that the isiXhosa learners are doing better than our Afrikaans learners. Bearing in mind that the number of learners in isiXhosa compared to Afrikaans is 1/3 of the total amount. Okay? So we ask ourselves, if schools had the paper, would the results be these type of results? My answer would be no. If they did have the paper, 250, or look at the number of learners in grade 3. In grade 3, there was 98,000 learners. 98,000 learners, and if 2,000 of them knew or had knowledge of the paper, let's say, that wouldn't have affected the results of the paper. Because 92,000 over 98,000 is what percentage? It's a minimal percentage. So numbers wouldn't affect the results at all. Now just to give you some idea of the curves, you notice of course that the curves are normally the same. For the blue, which is language, in 2017 we have a 44.6, and for mathematics it's 55.9. Bearing in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I've looked at schools and not at learners, and that is why the average is different to the average that you got when we gave the result. If we look at 2018, we see exactly the same. Now, it's fairly simple to do these type of curves. You can do it in Excel, and of course you'll get the results. All the formulae is given in Excel. You just need to do it. But just to say, if you look at that black line, it just gives you an indication of where our learners or where our schools are lying within the 34% percentile. They normally say within the 68%, 34 this side, 34 to the left, and 34 to the right, you have 68%. And that 68% will give you an idea of where our schools are lying. Yes, we have a number of schools that are to the right, which are doing, to my right, which are doing fairly well from the percentage-wise, compared to the schools that are also doing fairly weak. Just get this going quickly. Here again, it's important to note patterns, functions, and algebraic format. Schools went down, while learners went down by 11%. That means there's something in relation to algebraic format that our learners are not understanding. Now, for a district or a circuit to understand, they need to go to their circuit report. And in the circuit report, and I'll explain later what the circuit report entails as well. But we also find out these are what the schools are doing, the districts are doing in relation to numbers, patterns, space shape, measurement, and data handling. I see that learners tend to do space and shape and data handling fairly well. Space and shape has to do with 2-digit, 3-digit objects, sorry, 2 and 3 dimension stuff. Okay? Your numbers operation and relationships has to do with multiplication, which the learners do not do well. Fractions, not do well. as well as division that our learners are not doing well at. Your language, I want us to look at writing at grade 3. Grade 3, what we had was, I said the paper has become more dense at the grade 3 in language. Grade 3 learners had to write 3 little paragraphs of between 4 and 5 sentences. And there were 3 questions that they had to do. Now it could be that writing 3 passages of between 4 and 5 sentences were a little bit too much for grade 3 learners, but we wanted to understand whether the learner understood the passage that they read and whether they can tell us that story back to us. That was what was basically asked. And you'll be surprised how many of the learners rewrote the question of that question into the thing without even answering the question. Some of them even took the first 5 sentences of the passage and just rewrote it in the test. So learners cannot read with understanding. Word meaning is another problem. When you give them a word, we ask them the meaning, and the meaning is explained within the text itself. The learners cannot do that at grade 3 level. Now, for mathematics, these are all the concepts that were tested for grade 3. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to look at that. You can download your district report, and you'll find exactly all this information in your district report, which the district director has. I've made it available to everybody on EduInfoSearch, as well as the circuit report. So every circuit, from circuit 1 to circuit 10, will have exactly this explanation within the circuit as well. So you'll know where the circuit and what is problematic within the circuit. And I want to look at division. Afrikaans division, 11% of the learners didn't even attempt it. That is at grade 3 level. 7.5% at English and 8.3% at isiXhosa. Here again, our Afrikaans learners are not answering the questions. So what do we need to instill to our learners? Answer every question or attempt every question, bearing in mind each question is worth 1 mark. Okay? And most of the question is they give them the how it will be 3 plus whatever, or 20 minus whatever, or a 3-digit number, but we give them the thing and they then need to then answer as well. If you look at language, look at recall sentence writing. You give them a question and then they need to write the sentence just to recall the information that was asked of them. 18% Afrikaans, 13% for English, and 15% of isiXhosa learners didn't even attempt to answer the question. They just left it open. Okay? If you look at writing, writing is exactly the same, 13, 11, and 11%. Synonyms, words with the same meaning, 26% for Afrikaans, 20% for English, 19%. We have looked at it and we have made the service provider aware that most probably those words were too difficult. And we have to relook at those words again. Okay? For example, what is huge as a synonym? We had some of the answers: gigantic, big, large. We even had learners writing it is ginormous. Most probably from the movie. Okay? So they wrote, but of course, although it makes sense, we marked it right. Okay? So we didn't mark it wrong. The other thing is recall words. It's also giving us problems as well. So how did we do in Afrikaans language and isiXhosa across the different concepts that are being tested? You can look at it. I'm not going to explain it. It's self-explanatory of how we are doing at this stage. If you look at data, we're doing very well at that. That's graphs. So most of our learners could do graphs. And the graph is something simple. The graph is to give them a number, they have to put in the graph to show them if they understand what graphing is all. So many learners know pictographs and line and bar graphs, which they do know. Here again, if you're looking at the language 2018, look at writing, isiXhosa. Looking at Afrikaans and look at English. The learners at isiXhosa are not doing well at writing. Okay? Now, what should learners do? I do have the chief marker report, but the chief markers reports, they sometimes go overboard. You know, they speak about what teachers must do, what this, and that's none of their business. Or that's none of your business. That's, you know, we don't even give it to Karen in the state. What we do is we say, what is succinct to what it is? Remember when they start marking, the service provider who sets the paper, the WCED, and the chief markers and senior markers all come together and we discuss the paper with a memo as if we are discussing a matric examination. This is the way you answer. Bearing in mind, markers, the learner doesn't fail, nor does the learner pass. You don't think for the learner because it is a system thing. It is not to pass or to fail a learner at this stage. So the learners still struggle with measurement. Oh, I wonder what will happen one day if we must put a bridge up somewhere. The bridge will probably be short like the one in Cape Town, or never reach where it's supposed to reach, because not only are we struggling it with at grade 3, it's at grade 6, and the worst thing is it is at grade 9 as well. We can't do perimeter. If you can't do a simple thing like what is the perimeter of a block? Now with grade 9, they give a block and they give another block within that block. And they say, now what is the perimeter of the block minus the small block? The amount of different answers that we got was mind-boggling at this stage. Language, we're just saying a word, give learners enough practice on how to follow instructions. Oh, our learners can't follow instructions. You know, write in your own words and they copy directly from the passage. Most probably learners are not taught to go through examinations things. They write verbatim as I explained as well. I'm not going to go through this, ladies and gentlemen. This is on EduInfo search. You can get it for province, you can get it for circuit, you can get it for district, and you can get it for individual schools as well. So you can go to Ellersdale Primary, you can pull the school report, you can pull their diagnostic report, which is like that for maths as well as for language, and it will tell you item by item how each school has done, the concept that's tested, the assessment that we are looking at, and of course the learning area that was tested. So you could see the amount of work that has gone in to get that type of information. I'm going to go through that very fast. Let's go to the grade 6. I must say for the grade 6 there is a win situation. This is the only grade that went up when it comes to mathematics. Besides now grade 9, which went up by 1%. But this is the only group that really went up, even though we've restructured the paper. Here again, we also changed the paper. What was task 2 became task 1, which was task 1 became task 2. Okay? Yes, we did find learners that when they wrote the paper, they still answered questions. They still gave the answer in task 1, which was question 1. So we knew, of course, automatically, here's something that's not right. So we found out who those schools are. We found out. Okay, we're looking at the language. The language came down by 0.2%. Here again, we replaced one text. We replaced a rather simple text with a more difficult text. Just to say, some of the texts, ladies and gentlemen, are sometimes in the workbooks of our learners. And some of our teachers basically found out, or the learners found out that this was in their workbook because they write it in the test. Read before. So they knew that it's somewhere in the work that they've received. Okay. So the workbooks, ladies and gentlemen, remember, where do you find your questions? You find your questions from your textbooks, you find them from your workbooks, and you find them from the examples that you give them. And that's how they develop the text. It makes translation of the text into English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa much more simpler. Okay? So we're also trying to fool the system, but sometimes they fool us as well. Okay? We look at the results by mathematics, by language. Yes, the Afrikaans learners are struggling. I am currently looking at a further analysis by saying, if the learner is an Afrikaans-speaking learner and they have a different home language, what was their result? And that information will be on EduInfo Search. Okay? So you have Afrikaans learners performing Afrikaans, English, home language. How do they do in Afrikaans if they wrote the Afrikaans paper? isiXhosa, and of course you'll go down to whatever language, isiZulu, Sesotho, and whatever. Okay? That is why I say it's a hell of a lot of work when you do this type of analysis. And that's why I'm saying you must make numbers sexy. Okay? I look at figures, not the other figures. Okay? So if you're looking at the norm curve, you can see over here, the language is much higher in 2018 than in 2017. If you're looking at maths, that means what has happened is basically, let's say in Afrikaans, there's an afplatting of the normal curve. That means more schools are getting better results. So it's like a person who eats a lot. Which way do you go? You go this way. If you eat less, you go this way. Okay, and this has happened with results. The more difficult the paper, the less schools will be getting higher marks, so the graph becomes thinner. The easier the paper, the more schools get better marks, the wider the thing goes. And that is how you look at when you're looking at a norm curve. So the better the results, the wider the norm curve, because more people are doing better results. The learning areas, here again, shame, space and shape, minus 28%. 2D, 3D, angles, cylinders. Those are the type of things we find that learners can't recognize these things when it comes in the test itself. Yes, they did quite good at measurement, the grade 8. Oh, by the way, there's one question in the grade 3 level that has been my gripe for the last 4 years. I take it many of us can look at our watches today and tell us the time. Grade 3 learners, ladies and gentlemen, cannot tell analog time. If John, and I'm giving the same example, and these are the examples that's in the question paper, can be different. John must catch the train at 8 in the morning. Due to Metro Rail, the train's only delayed by 2 hours. The train normally takes an hour to get to town. So that means if it's 8, it takes an hour, he gets at 9. The train is delayed by 2 hours. What time does John get to town? He gets to town at 11 o'clock. Our grade 3 learners do not understand the concept of time. Okay, so we need to get that to the learners. If you look at how our districts are doing, you can look at how your district is doing. I will make this presentation will be available to each and every one as well. If you're looking at writing, learners went up from 18% to 31. Okay. So the grade 6 learners are getting understanding of writing and how to do the writing. But we do have a problem with thinking and reasoning. Okay, 10 minutes. We're almost there. Now, if you look at mathematics, these are all the different types of questions we ask our grade 6 learners. You know, shapes, matching, MCQ, number line and fractions. There's a myriad of different areas. Okay? And all those areas are reported at school level, at circuit level, at district level, at provincial level. So Ms. Dudley will be getting the provincial level. The district directors and the chief curriculum advisors will get it at the district level. The circuit managers with the curriculum advisors will get it also at circuit level, and they can go individually to their schools. Just to say, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot give the results of all schools by circuit packaged. It's too much information. Okay, and that's why we can't do it at this stage. Let's look at how they do it by Afrikaans and English. Your critical higher order questions, that is, you know, what's happening? Why do you think it's this thing? It's the why type of question, right? Completing a sentence. If you're looking at the worst areas, it's mostly sentence writing on thinking. That means they must be able to interpret almost how that answer is given over them. But here again, most of the work or the questions that we are giving is questions that the learner should have understood. Okay? And I'm using the word should have. I'm not saying must. Here's it per language for mathematics. Here again, if we're looking at space and shape, the difference in 2018, 62 for English, 44. And here again, I think for grade 6 it's important that when you look at language, is to look also at what is the home language of that learner to get that result. Because parents will say, I want my child to do English when the learner's first language is Afrikaans. Yes, we do have that at isiXhosa schools. The learner must change from isiXhosa in grade 3 to English in grade 4, and then need to carry and must learn the English terms, which can be a little bit testing for our isiXhosa learner to do it within a 3-year period. If you're looking at language, here again, look at English 2017 at writing, 11.1%. Look at writing in 2018, 35.5%. So that means schools have been doing something. You know, they've been the writing has taken place. Also bearing in mind that we had 2 new writing questions in the paper. The previous year we had 1. In 27 we had 1 writing question. This year we have 3 writing questions for grade 6. And they fared much better with the 3 than with the 1. Which tells me something. Okay? Which tells me something. Most probably in the previous year the learners could not understand the passage when they wrote. Now the passages that they got, which is the same passage as last year, one of them, they now understood what was expected of the learner and they did them better. Yeah, we are now in the new metric system. So please, ladies and gentlemen, avoid using decimals to denote thousands. So the learner write 1, 00 for 1,000. In South Africa, we use a space. Okay? For decimals, we don't use the point, we use the comma. Unless you want to Americanize our decimals, then of course you use the point. Excel only takes the point. You must tell Excel to accept the comma if you want Excel to do a calculation for you. Okay? So please, we just try to avoid that. they didn't mark anything wrong. They still marked the answers correct of the learners, just to inform you. Problem solving. So if it's in a word sum, they found it difficult to do. Encourage learners not to leave any questions unanswered in multiple choice questions. Apologies for that sentence construction. I get naught for language and structure. Learners still struggle with measurement, although they did much better. Okay? Language. Encourage learners to try to do all the writing questions. We still have learners that's not doing it. Promote reading and comprehension. Difficult in understanding the meaning of given words in context. And of course the last one is most learners struggle to... Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is my amen when it comes to the grade 3 and grade 6. But we need to get an understanding that systemic tests is not there as a promotion thing. Now, some schools phone me and they say, you know, my students passed. How can I get 30% pass rate? But then you look at what is the SBAs that they do at the school compared to the systemic. Now, I always tell teachers, I'm not in the business of passing or promoting a learner. My interest is, can we do what is expected of us to do? And that is where I put my full stop. I don't expect what the school do is how they manage the learners, whether they want to pass from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3. And I look at it totally different. So when my child will be writing grade 9 this year, my laptop is there. But they will never, ever ask, can I use your laptop? Because they know, you know, that's none of their business. But it shows, right, that when we look at it, or we look at systemic, we must look at systemic as a holistic picture and not at an individualistic picture of what has Sinton done, or what has Ishikumu done, or what has Zimaza done, and now say, let's take out the whip and let's whip them like the Voortrekkers did in the Great Trek. We're not there anymore. Okay? We're there to assist and to guide our learners. And as was mentioned yesterday, let's not concentrate on the weakness. I've mentioned the weaknesses, but we need to look at the strengths to see where we are going and how we can improve our strengths to improve the WCD. I've also come prepared, by the way, in case the thingy goes dead. I brought my papers along. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful, comprehensive, insightful presentation by Dr. Ronald Cornelissen. Could we give him another round of applause, please? And Ronald, we just want to, at this point in time, I'm going to call on the Chief Education Specialist for Foundation Phase at Head Office, Ms. Almareto Toy, just to do a little token of appreciation to Dr. Cornelissen, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is our very and our ultimate, our priority purpose, where we come in here, we're here to serve our learners, we're here to serve our teachers. And Dr. Cornelissen, you've played such a pivotal role, because this is a yardstick for us, and I like what you've said, Ronald, that it's about a mindset change. It's not to go out there with a whip. Getting a whip now and again could be tantalizing, ladies and gentlemen, but not in this case. Well, that could be child abuse if we're going out to our school. Charmaine, I'll keep it at that. I saw your eyes rolling. Thank you for the cue. And so, but we also want to thank Dr. Siengo in absentia, and team, as well as Dr. Cornelissen, who has come out faithfully. He does a number of sessions when it comes to the sharing the findings with us, because that's going to be the yardstick. He's going to go into the various rooms. He's been with the management. He'll be with the foundation phase tomorrow, and this is only at the end. You heard Ronald say how early he gets those results, and now we take it even further, where you go into your different PLCs, your HOD meetings, the managers' meetings, etc. And we sometimes need to relook our objectives and refine those. And Ronald, so we really want to thank you for the role that you play within the WCD, how you guide us, the way in which you bring across the information. So we really just want to say this is a token of our appreciation, and thank you that we have a partner and a cousin like you in the WCD. Thank you so much, sir. Just keep it nicely. A little photo, someone. I don't see a photograph. Come now. Remember, we do have charging boxes at the back for Patsy. What is that? No, Patsy, not that. They're not that toy, Patsy. For what is it? What did we say it's for? Diana? It is for cell phones. Just guide Patsy. I don't know what you're teaching in your team there, Diana. So, Dr. Cornelissen, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it.
Doing some statistical analysis there. But if you do send me a mail, I'll see if I can't work on your stuff after hours, but that also will take some time as well.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I don't know why he wants to work on your stuff after hours. Isn't that ominous, Leslie Pearson? But we take it. He does have sexy figures, so Doc, we'll take it with tongue in cheek and nothing else in cheek but tongue. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on with a wonderful program set out for today. And so at this point in time, if you'd allow me just one or two formalities and announcements. Introduced to you yesterday, but our beautiful young lady had just stepped out. We need all claims by 11 a.m. today, please. And I'm going to ask Nandi if you could step forward so the ladies and gentlemen can see. She'll be in the foyer area, ladies and gentlemen. So please look out for Nandi, who is in our admin section, doing sterling work. So isn't she gorgeous? Beauty and brains, of course, only a woman can have that. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nandi is doing all our claims, and so you'll find her in the reception area. Please don't take her anywhere else, Hussein. She stays in the reception area for the claims. Thank you so much, Nandi. So they know me already. Shame. Of course, when I get to work, somebody offers me a cup of coffee tomorrow, Marilyn, then I don't take it because I don't know what they're going to do to take revenge on me. I'm just saying that just teasingly. The other thing I do on a more serious note, the charging stations within here for mobile phones, Leslie, nothing else, as well as in the bar area, stay away from that social butterfly. You know who you are, Vanessa. And then in your rooms, ladies and gentlemen, please do sign your register. You have signed online, but for the Auditor General, you need to have a paper-based register, so that is in your breakaway facility. Now, when you arrived, we had quite a lovely little bit of nibbly bits and snacks and cucumber sandwiches. Or if you me, then of course I would be looking out, Joanne. If you gave me a cucumber sandwich, I'm going to open it up and look, what, did you forget to put something on it? You know, Angie? But here it's cucumber sandwiches. They didn't forget to put anything on it. So you eat it with a little finger up, ladies and gentlemen, and you bite on it very nicely, Leslie, as if this is the norm. And that in my coloured manner, I'm not, oh gosh, did I say coloured? In my Clara manner, Joey, that's for you, darling, you and I understand. In my Clara manner, look for the polony still on it. All right. So what I am saying is when you go out, your refreshment stations are outside your room. Now you'll look around and just see, look next to you, look at your neighbor, and do you see a smiley face or a slightly grim face? Just look around. Smiley or grim? Now, if you see a slightly grim face, now you're not sure, damn, let me just smile and what is she coming up with? The poor math and languages people shared this room yesterday. Nou as jy maar so 'n bietjie suurknol gesig gesien het vanoggend, if you saw a little bit of a sour face, then you must know you were one of those people. Jou kos is by jou kamer. Moenie Moenie worry nie. It's quite okay, ladies and gentlemen. Leave these alone. Look at poor Portia there. You can see she's even lost a kilo or two. Portia, your food will be here. Don't worry, baby. I've protected you. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, it's really my honor and pleasure to welcome our next guest speaker. And I'm going to ask the CES for Intermediate and Senior Phase, Mr. Ibrahim Peck, to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, colleagues. It's really a privilege to introduce Abbas Jamie. He's got a long bio, but I'll just go short through this. Abbas is a registered professional engineer and is currently Director of Innovation and Transformation at the Oricon Group, a multinational engineering advisory business. He is responsible for driving Oricon's innovation program in the whole of Africa. He has spent his career across government and private sectors, as well as establishing a number of startup businesses. He has been involved in numerous mergers and acquisitions, as well as project initiation teams for major infrastructure projects in South Africa. Being a trained systems thinker and futurist allows him to bring a new perspective to Oricon's innovation portfolio. He is responsible for embedding design thinking, across the business to ensure that Oricon's strong pedigree of engineers can be more future ready. He is a registered professional engineer and holds qualifications across the engineering, business, futures fields. His specialist areas include business strategy, African innovation, design thinking, transformation of corporate South Africa, and futures thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Abbas Jamie.
Thanks. Wow, it's quite an introduction. That was a fantastic opening you had this morning, Karen. Really, it was wonderful. We have a saying in our company, and I can't dance. If people are watching me, we would see I'm not good at dancing. But we have a saying in our company, if you can't dance, then create the space for people to dance. And I think you've really done that, and it's a real nice takeaway. I'm also nervous because I'm in between the sexy numbers presentation and Dr. Eve. So I'm hoping I'm going to live up to the expectations. So anyway, let's go. Yes, I'll be speaking about design thinking. As was mentioned, I'm part of a large engineering consulting company. About 2,000 engineers across Africa, so we're hardcore engineers. But we've been on a journey for the last 2.5 years of embracing design thinking, and it's been a fantastic experience. So I'm going to share some of those thoughts with you. So why design thinking? Let's switch this off. Get that out of there. So this is... Hello? Okay. So this is a... Hello? One? Okay, cool. Let me switch this off. Okay, one. We get rid of this. Cool. I just want to make a reference to this report, The Futures of Universities. It's a thought book that was published last year by about 40 experts across the education field, gave their thoughts on what future universities are going to be looking like and where they're going to be focused. An extract from this report says, think about it. The occupations which are in biggest demand right now did not exist 10 years ago. The majority of kids currently entering primary school will end up doing jobs that do not exist today. Half of the subject knowledge acquired during a technical degree is outdated by the time of graduation. We have to prepare for urgent and targeted action to manage the near-term transition and build a workforce with future-proof skills. Otherwise, we will be hit by unemployment and shrinking consumptions. And I think that's what we call a wicked problem. And we know the education space has lots of wicked problems. And so the challenge, I think, for the people in the room is, how are you, as the people driving education in this province, going to rise to this occasion and tackle this wicked problem? And do we have the skills to be able to do that? And so what I'm going to be talking about today is how we can use tools like design thinking to be able to help us to do that. And so, as I said, education, a wicked problem. And the first thing when you deal with wicked problems is to understand that it's complex and that it encompasses all of these things. Because sometimes we move straight to what is the technical answer. But when you deal with wicked problems, you need to understand there's politics at play, there's economics, there's social, there's resources. And if we look at, let's say, the day zero problem in Cape Town, many people think that's a technical problem. It was probably not a technical problem. And we know quite a number of the numbers around the water. It wasn't a technical problem. It was more of a social, political problem that created this whole day zero concept. And then the other thing to remember is that when dealing with wicked problems, you need to contextualize that in the space that you are, that you find yourself. And so in the South African context, we've got the NDP 2030. It's a very nice futurist document of what our country can look like in 2030. And again, I'm not sure how many people have actually read this document. Because if we don't have a view of what South Africa looks like, we're going to continue down this path of divergence. And it's two very different worldviews of what our country looks like right now. The one is coming from the greeny suburbs, and the other one from the townships. And so how do we bring our children together and have this joint vision of what South Africa can look like? And then at a continental level, we have the AU 2063 plan of what the continent can look like by 2063. And at the global level, we've got the Sustainable Development Goals. All of these documents talk about education. And so whatever we're doing, how does it fit into these documents? Because these are very good documents, and they have very broad buy-in already. And so if we contextualize whatever we're going to be doing, align it with these documents, it's a good start. And so if we move on to this issue of complexity, wicked problems, there's two types of thinking. The one is the analytical thinking, and then the other one is the systems thinking. So people like myself, engineers, we are trained to think analytically. And if you are building a bridge, you better know your analytics, because otherwise the bridge collapses. But when the client says, I need a bridge, we say, is it a concrete bridge, steel bridge? Because I have both designs, I'm ready to go. Very seldom do we ask, well, why do you want the bridge? Well, people need to cross the river, or why are they crossing the river? We're not trained to do that. We're trained to get to the solution as quickly as possible. And so sometimes what you find, not sometimes, most times, when you're dealing with complex problems, you're actually solving the wrong problem because you're asking the wrong question. And so this brings us to design thinking. Design thinking is a tool that you can use to think more systemically about wicked, complex problems and making sure that you are solving the right problem and not going down the path of solving the wrong problem. And so where does design thinking come from? Design thinking comes from the industrial design world. Industrial designers are people that design all the things that we see around us. So this thing, the chair you're sitting on the table that you're working at. And when they design that thing, they bring their creativity to it, but they also put the human at the center of that thing because it's a human that needs to interact with this thing. And so this field has been around for many, many decades. And then the business world said, can we take this concept of human centricity, of creativity, and bring it into business? And this company, IDEO, has done that extremely well. And so they're sort of at the forefront of bringing design thinking into the business world. And so many companies globally have adopted design thinking, and they've embedded it into the way they operate. And so we all know these companies. Anyone know the one on the top right? Anyone? It's a company called Google Ventures. It's Google's venture cap business. And they have something called a design sprint. They go from concept to prototype 5 days. And using that methodology, they've invested into hundreds of businesses. And not only technology business, they've invested into a company called Blue Bottle Coffee. It's like, why another coffee company? But using this methodology of understanding the end user intimately, they've become very successful. And so when you ask these companies, what does design thinking mean to you? You have these sort of responses coming. It's this human-centric approach. It creates empathy, invention, and iteration. You're able to discover new solutions. It's a systematic approach to solving wicked problems. It's a space for creativity to flourish. And then very important, it unlocks innovation. And so we see creativity, exploration is a fundamental tool to unlocking innovation. And when I say innovation, I'm not talking about the technology. I'm talking about how do we deal, for example, with the education crisis we have in our country. For me, innovation is how do you disrupt an existing ecosystem that is not working efficiently? And how do you make it better? That's innovation. And so everyone in this room needs to become super innovators. And so what are the tools and what is the mindset that's required to create super innovators? And so, like I mentioned, I come from a technical world. We are now challenged with how do we engage with the creative world. And when I say the creative world, I'm talking about these type of people, the storytellers, the creatives, artists, musicians, photographers. And we don't do it well. And most businesses don't do that well either. And in education, we need to ask ourselves, what have we done with creativity? I know from when I was at school, if you're good at maths, you go into the A class. And we know where the artists go. And never shall the two meet. As the largest engineering company in South Africa now, we are looking for engineers who are musicians, who are artists, who are photographers, who can bring that creativity to the table. And so this creativity becomes a fundamental building block of innovation. And so the opening today of the dancing, a lot of people just think, oh, that's crazy fun. We call it fun with serious intent. And that doesn't come easy. Because especially, I'm not sure in the education space, but in the private sector, everything is very rigid. And you need to break that down. Because I'm going to take it from a business perspective, but it applies probably to education as well. So in the business world, we've got on the left-hand side that 100% reliability. And on the other side, we have the designers, the creatives. And we're saying that in the middle, where those two come together, there's a sweet spot where innovation can really flourish, where you can unlock groundbreaking innovation. And we use tools like design thinking to help us find that sweet spot. And so a very quick example, this is Dubai. This is going to be the tallest building in the world called the Towers. We call it the Calatrava Towers, named after the architect Calatrava. So we're the engineers on this. So we've got one of the world experts on tall buildings, structural engineer. And they asked him at a conference 2 years ago, so what's the most difficult thing you are dealing with on this building? And everyone expects him to say, well, the sway of the building or the materials. And he says, no, the most difficult thing is dealing with on this building is that the lifts for this building has been specially designed for it, because it's a kilometer high, right? Kilometer. So this lifts need to fly. His biggest problem as a structural engineer now is, how do the people using the lifts not get motion sickness? So now you have a structural engineer, you need to speak to a doctor to understand motion sickness to see how they're going to overcome this problem. Because guess what? The analytics, the technical side, relating to the structure of this building is being done by artificial intelligence. That's the future, like it or not. And that's all industries. We are all being disrupted by this technology. The future engineer is not going to necessarily be the most technically competent person. It's going to be the one that can think out of the box. It's going to be the one that can be creative. It's going to be the one that can engage with other people. And so what does that mean for you as the education sector? Back to my opening slide of the children coming into primary school now. What are they going to be doing in 12 years' time when they leave school? And so we see design thinking. We call it design to innovate-abled companies. We see they can respond better to change. So we have complexity going up at a rapid rate. The world is just becoming more and more complex. We see the rate of change also going crazy, and a lot of that driven from a technology perspective. And we see companies just falling off the edge because they cannot adapt to that. But we do see a trend of design-led companies that are able to adapt to that change much better. And so again, this becomes a very good tool for you to be able to deal with complexity, with rapid change. And so if design thinking is this human-centric approach, and it's taken off globally in the West, in Europe, it's fairly well entrenched already. It's still fairly new in Africa. I'm not sure how many people have heard of design thinking. Anyone, just show of a hand quickly? No one? One? One, okay, cool. So design thinking is still fairly new in Africa. If you go to Europe, you go to America, you go to Australia, when you talk to design thinking, people know what it's about. And so we said, if design thinking is this human-centric approach, what does it mean for Africa? And is human centricity in Africa different to human centricity in Europe? And we see it's significantly different. Not only from a geography, but from a religion, everything, it's just completely different. And so we've worked with the World Design Organization, who's a body of representing industrial designers globally, and we've come up with this narrative that we call African design innovation. And you'll see it's Africa with a K. And the reason it's Africa with a K is that if we look on the African continent, there's more than 2,000 dialects. They all refer to Africa with a K, including Afrikaans. So Africa with a K, in our view, is this inward-looking out perspective of the continent, compared to the outside world looking in and saying, how much money does this continent need right now? It's us as Africans taking ownership of our future and our destiny and saying, how are we going to shape this continent? And this human-centric approach can only come from us as Africans. And so when we start talking in design thinking in an African context, I think within the education space there's a fantastic opportunity for people to really take thought leadership in the space of defining what education can look like in an African context on the African continent and in South Africa. And using this human-centric approach, it will be something very, very unique. And I think that's the challenge I put out to everyone here. And so I just want to give you show you some of the tools, and there's lots of tools. If you Google design thinking, you'll get overwhelmed with all the tools. All of these tools are there basically to take complexity and try and simplify it. Okay, and so this is one of the tools that we use that's called the design wave. And so what we do as engineers, when the client says, I need a bridge, we jump straight to the end. What works? Concrete, steel. Because we know it's worked before, and so we go to that. Now we train our engineers to come back, pull back, and go back to what is the problem? Why do you actually need the bridge? And so it's a very different discussion that we start having with our clients. And we've managed to change direction of projects completely using this approach. And so it becomes a very powerful tool to use. Here's another one, it's called the double diamond, where once you have a problem, you diverge the thinking and just go crazy with ideas. you converge, getting a better definition of what the actual problem is, you diverge it again, and then come up with a solution. Again, very simplistic model, but very, very effective. And it's this concept of saying, you don't have to design something to the nth degree. If you have an idea, go and test it quickly, get ideas from the end users, from stakeholders. And in South Africa, we have the public participation process fairly well entrenched. But in reality, in most cases, it's after the event. So we'll design something very nice, do the drawings, and then take it to a town hall to present to people. Do you want this? What do you want the people to say? And so that's not what design thinking is. It's going, before you draw the first line on a page, putting yourself in the shoes of the end user, and I'll give you some examples of that as well. We use these sort of ecosystem mapping, which makes you understand your end user better, the things that's impacting him, high impact, high priority. Again, very simplistic tools, very effective when you do it. What we've discovered with this tool, when we do it with clients, and you put that end user in the center, how little they actually know about the end user. It's just amazing when you start unpacking it. Well, we don't actually know. And they've been designing for these people for years. This is the model that we use to understand the end user. It's called the SPICE model, where you actually unpack what is the person's social, physical, his identity, how he communicates, and his emotional state. This is called journey mapping, where we take someone through the journey from the time he wakes up in the morning, let's say get into work if you're looking at the traffic problem, and through this journey mapping you pick up these pain points for the day. What is highs, what is lows, and then how do you design out the lows of his journey. Because sometimes when the journey is just massive, you just get overwhelmed with it, and if you focus in on actual problems, you can deal with it much better. This one, a very, very simple tool, and again, something which I encourage you people to embrace. It's called the 5 whys. Now, when we were 4 years old, we all asked why. And your parents tolerated you to a certain extent until it got to the point of, because I say so, right? And that as you start growing up, that gets beaten out of you, so you don't ask why anymore. And when you get to primary school, you can ask why once, twice, and then by the time you get to university, by the time you get to business, you don't ask why. You follow the rules, the regulations, the guidance. This 5 whys is an extremely powerful tool. Extremely powerful. And the example that's here is the problem statement is around the Titanic, the world's largest, most grand cruise ship that sank or was lost at sea. So you ask the question, why was it lost at sea? Well, because it ran into an iceberg. Well, why did it run into an iceberg? Because the captain set a course through waters known to be littered with icebergs. Why would the captain set a course through waters known to be littered with icebergs? Because it was the shortest passage between Britain and New York City. Why did he choose the shortest passage between Britain and New York City? Because he was trying to break the speed record. Why was he trying to break the speed record? Because his wealthy US passengers pressured him to get to New York as soon as possible. There was not a problem with the ship. It was the world's best ship. And it wasn't a problem with the captain. And so when you deal with wicked problems, using this 5 whys, and all of you can use this immediately. When you go home, you can use it. But what it does, it ignites this concept of exploration. Because our children, this concept of exploration dies as they go through school. And how do you keep that alive? And so this becomes a very nice tool to be able to, they can actually ask why. And it's all right to ask why. And ask it 5 times. Okay, so that's some of the tools. I'm just going to go through 2 quick examples so you people can understand. And it's both engineering examples, so hopefully not problematic. So this was a project we did with at Nairobi Innovation Week about 2 years ago. I'm not sure how many people have been to Nairobi. It's a very beautiful city, very green. It's got its name from the Nairobi River. Many parts of the river in Nairobi very polluted. And the government come in and clean up a section. 2 years later, it'll be polluted again. And so we said, let's run an exercise with the students at Nairobi University, and took them through a design thinking session. So normally what we would do as engineers is we'd go in and say, this is the river. We'd put together a guideline document of how you need to develop along the river, so far from the river, the water quality. This approach, we said, well, let's take this human-centric approach. And so using a human-centric approach, we said, what is the role of rivers in Africa? And do rivers play a role in shaping who we are as Africans? And through a little bit of research, we discovered that the rivers play a significant role in shaping who we are as Africans. Not only from a culture, from a religion, it's just a huge thing. And we discovered in Nairobi there's this term called by the riverside. When you had a special announcement to make, you'd go down to the river to make that announcement. When there were special meetings, you'd go down to the river to have those meetings. The other interesting thing we found out about the rivers is that rivers cross colonial boundaries without seeing it. Traditions, cultures, just go across these borders. They don't see the borders. And so we see rivers play a very significant part in shaping who we are as Africans. And so we set it to the students to say, if you embrace the river, you embrace your heritage as an African. You're embracing your culture as an African. And if you do that, we then ask, using that, how can you play a role in keeping the river clean? Because once they've embraced that concept of that the rivers is theirs and it defines who they are, you can then start talking about what technology you need to keep the river clean and come clean up the river. It's a very different approach. And so these students came in and we took them through some of these tools. And all of them, when they came in, they had a very simple answer. Well, the city must just clean up the river. Why are they not cleaning up the river? That's the automatic response. When they left, the response was, the river is ours. We need to own the river. We need to make solutions for this problem. And so over a 4-hour period in the workshop with these students, we were able to change their mindset to say, this is my problem, this is my heritage. It's not the city's responsibility. And so imagine the power of that if we can start getting our children to adapt that sort of mindset. Because it's very easy for us to look at government and blame government for everything. How do we as the community and how do we as teachers get our children to take responsibility and ownership? And we were able to do this with a 4-hour workshop with these students. Second example is a project called Africanness in Motion. I'm not sure how many people know Yasso Bully. He's a Cape Townian photographer. He operates on the fringes. And Yasso was doing this public transport trip from Cape Town to Dar es Salaam. It was also about 2 years ago. Yasso has this ability to take really beautiful photos. And he can capture the emotions of people regardless of their physical environment. And so when we heard he was going on this journey, we said, Yasso, we want to go with you on this journey. He's like, why does an engineering company want to come with me? But by going with him on this journey, what we now have is this very rich visual story of the public transport community in Africa. Because in most cases, we sit in very fancy buildings like this and we design these things across the continent with actually very little empathy for the end user. And so, this is my favorite photo. And Yasso has this ability to engage with people. So this girl was traveling with a mother and father and a baby brother, taking the brother to hospital. And they got off the train to stretch their legs. And Yasso engages with the father and asks if he can take this photograph. And this girl couldn't take her eyes off the camera. And so as he took the photo, the father says, Zambian girl. And that became the name of this photograph. And behind this photograph is a whole story of why they were traveling. This is a photo of peak hour traffic in Joburg. Again, the journey that many South Africans take, and people of privilege don't really experience that on a daily basis. Yeah. This one is also a very interesting story. This woman makes reed brooms, and she sells these reed brooms outside her house. But she needs to travel somewhere else, by train to get the reeds, put it in these bags, and then get it onto the train and get back home. This train is not designed for bags to carry reeds. So this is a pain point for her every time she needs to do this, but this is the only choice that she has. This is Oom Jan. Oom Jan has worked for the railways his whole life. And when you retire from the railways, you get to travel for free twice a year. So he loves rail, and it's in his blood, and he's on his way to Joburg for his holiday. This is a very interesting story also. This guy manufactures popcorn machines and sells it along the side of the road. And he was waiting for the bus to go into town to get spare parts for his popcorn machines. And so we start having this, like I said, a very rich visual story of the public transport to commuter in Africa. And Yasser relayed a very interesting story for me when we started this project. He says, because he released his book in Europe about 2 years ago. And so he says, when you travel on the London Underground and you try and make eye contact with someone, they will look away. You don't engage with strangers. He said, yet he's sitting on the bus in the middle of nowhere on his way to Mozambique. And a complete stranger next to him, she opens her lunch and she shares the lunch with him. And at this point, he realizes this is humanity. This is civilization. Because we as Africans often make the mistake that we believe we need to catch up with the West. So the challenge for us now as Africans is saying, how do we design public transport systems, making use of the latest technology innovation, but not losing the humanity in the system? And I think that is very relevant for you people as educators as well. So, how am I doing for time? Am I still good? 5 minutes, okay, cool. So, when we start talking about innovation, we start talking about the future, this disruption that's coming. What I just want to leave you people with is some thoughts around how do you think about the future. And so when you think about the future, you tend to jump straight into whether it's whiteboards or whatever other technologies disrupting education. But you need to think at a more higher level, a macro level. So for me, I've identified these sort of 5 major trends that are impacting the future. And so we all know about the energy space, massive things happening in energy and the renewables. On the material side, the bottom left, it's, I'm not sure how many people have heard of graphene. It's a new 2-dimensional material that's been manufactured, stronger than steel, very conductive. So if you build a plane from this, for example, you'll be able to see through the holes of the plane. On the proteomics level, crazy things happening there with genetics and stuff. Then obviously the ICT, lots happening into that space, fourth industrial revolution. And then transport as well. Massive things happening at transport level. And so let me just explain to you, we use in transport, because transport is something that everyone can relate to, and how you think about the future. So if we look at transport, the horse and cart came about sometime 5th century BC. And for 25 centuries, it was the modes of transport. Up until 1914, when Mr. Ford introduced the Model T vehicle. When he introduced the assembly line in 1914, it took 14 years to obliterate the horse and cart industry. Yet, if you had to ask people in the horse and cart industry in 1913, what is innovation, they might have said, well, a bigger cart or a faster horse. And so they did not see it at this macro level of transport that it was being disrupted. If we fast forward to today, 1914 today is just over 100 years. We've gone from the Model T to that. The question is, how long can we sustain that? And if you ask people in the motor industry, well, you can't really get rid of cars, right? It employs too many people, the industry is too big. It's the same answers that the horse and cart industry gave in 1914. It's going to be disrupted. And that disruption that comes normally comes from outside your industry. We all know these examples. Apple was not in the cell phone business. Airbnb doesn't own any hotels. Uber don't own any vehicles. But they were able to disrupt industries, established industries. And the thing about these brands is They explore. They understand consumer trends before they become trends. They use creativity and design to unlock successful innovation. And they have deep empathy for the end user. If you look at these three brands, which I'm sure most people in the room will know, these three brands, if they decide to disrupt the space, they probably will be fairly successful. Last year sometime, these three brands came together and said, we are going to create our own medical industry. We will own everything in that value chain. From the doctors to the medical hospitals, everything. We'll start with our own employees. So the medical aid industry is going to be disrupted by these guys. The challenge for you in the room is, who is going to disrupt education? And how are you going to respond to that? In closing, why is this all important? Our president at BRICS Summit said last year, we should not allow technology to shape our societies. We must instead ensure that the needs of our societies shape the technologies that we develop. He also made the reference to the World Bank report that said the three most important skills for an employee by 2020 will be complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. Without adequate training, only a few emerging economies will possess these skills in sufficient numbers, while others will see the prospects stifled by automation. That is the challenge for the people in this room. We need to develop these skills. And it starts at grade 1. And so moving forward, that's what I'd like to leave you with. The future is unknown. You cannot predict the future, but you can be part of shaping a better future. When you do that, keep the end user in mind. Make sure you understand that end user 110%. Understand this whole concept of a shared economy, which is disrupting everything. Make sure you look at it through an African lens. Very importantly, don't lose the creativity. We need to blend that maths and creativity together and understand that complexity is exactly that. It's complex. There is not a linear answer to it. And you need to think more systemically about the future. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Abbas Jamie? I thought I was the one who had creativity, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, that he was stuck between Dr. Cornelissen's sexy figures and Dr. Eve, whatever she will deliver. I see the gents have gone even further back now, ladies and gentlemen. But, Jamie, will you please join me on the stage? Now, how do you like this man's shoes? Come on, lift your leg up, show it to them. Are those sexy shoes or not? Dr. Eve, I'd love to hear your definition of the very formal suit, ladies and gentlemen, but go down, baby, and check them shoes.
Didn't see my socks.
He says I must check his socks. It's now getting dangerous, Gail. I don't know what next I'm going to have to check. I'm getting shaky. Let me just tell him who's in here. Is there someone in the room that will scratch his eyes out? On a much more serious note, thank you so much, Jamie, the way you've shared with us this morning and the way you've taken technology, the way you've taken design thinking and still including the human factor in all of that and how we need to adapt our thinking and how do we draw all of this, ladies and gentlemen, and adapt it to our engagement with teachers in the classroom. How do we change our mindsets? How do we prepare our learners for the future? It also links in beautifully. I could see Anina's little toes and fingers twinkling there, and the other creative arts advisors, Dion, Tasha, Margie, Philip, all of them sitting out there. Wave, wave there. You've spoken the language. But now look at the amount of persons in this room. Did you see the few fingers waving? And that is the least amount of creative arts that we have. And we talk about STEAMAC and how we want to do innovation and how we need to tap into the creative part. Because while you say, you made a very pertinent point about going to school, and the math children who'd go to one class, and then the arts children would go to another, and yet shall the two meet. Tasha, you know what I'm talking about in the creative arts, and what a sweet taste that will be, ladies and gentlemen. But on a more serious note, that is what the mindset of education. I love what you also said. How do you disrupt a system that isn't working and correct it? And this is the new vision of the Western Cape Education Department, to disrupt, ladies and gentlemen, to say it's not working, let's break out, let's bring a change, let's be the change. We want to be the change. Quality education in our lifetime. Say it after me. Quality education in our lifetime. Not when I'm sitting on the stoop with a rickety thing. I can't actually picture myself like that. I don't think I'll ever be like that, La. But we want quality education for our children. We say we've come through gutter education. Have we? Let's be the change. Let's make the change. Say after me, I am the change. I am the change. Utter your name. Karen is the change. Wayne is the change. Ismail is the change. Say your name. Hear it. Put it out there. Let me hear you. Louder. 1, 2, here we go. Who's the change? Claim your space, ladies and gentlemen. Jamie, you brought a wonderful inspiration, knowing that we don't only act in our own space. I'm going to ask Mr. Ismail Taladia just to hand over a token of our appreciation. And thank you so much. And so before we start with our next guest speaker, take a look at the following slide.
Auto driving mode activated.
Wasn't that something? And I was dubious, should I show that? I know some of you have seen it already. I love the definition of the interracial couple. I love the definition of how the future is and how some of that is already taking place. Don't fool yourselves, guys. Some of that is already possible. And while we talk about design thinking, how we change that, I heard someone shouting out there, "New Gigi, new Gigi, new Gigi." So we'll definitely have to see if that could be the new Gigi. And that is the government cars that we have to drive, especially those who are in the rural districts. Wouldn't you just love that, Nonnie, if you could relax and there the car drove you and you arrived at your workshop? So I'm telling you, we got to move and shake around here. But the other thing also, which I did have a little bit of a problem with the video, was where the woman was at home taking care of the child. So, but that is just me in my personal capacity, and I'd have liked to see mommy and mommy, or daddy and daddy as well. So maybe I should make a new video. What do you think, Leslie Pearson? Thank you for that support, Leslie. Thank you, Ruth. Well done to you. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on, and that is to really tell you that that is what's really happening out there. Don't fool yourselves. I think, Jamie gave us a very clear, and the things that you've encountered and where you know where all of this sits. And so it's happening in countries already. And so we can't be left behind and think that we are in Africa and that we are a third world country. We are talking, if you look at your program, future-focused education. That's what we are aiming for. We are preparing learners, we always say, for careers that we don't even know what will be. And so how are we going to get them ready with those 4 C's, with the ICT, as well as not losing out on the human factor? And so, ladies and gentlemen, not losing out on the human factor and how we influence those learners, the impact of our language plays such an important role, not only for learners, but for teachers, as our theme of Year of the Learner. When I had a reflection meeting with the team last night, and then I met a little later with the management team, and I said to them, well, guys, let's decide who will introduce which guest speaker. And you can see them giggling uneasily here. Ibrahim het sommer vir my gekyk en sê, los vir my en Dr. Eve af asseblief, Karen. No, Doc, I don't know what they're expecting, but I'm very excited. And so, Ibrahim Shem, darling, I just had to do that to you. Almaret said to me, so sorry to interpret in English, he said, please just leave me far away from Dr. Eve. I will do somebody else. And to Bluasa, he blushed a little bit. I said, sweetheart, don't feel so insecure. You're absolutely sexy. I love every part of you. And then, of course, I went to Almaret. Die het gesê, luister, ek is 'n boereklimuit, los net vir my af asseblief. Los vir my by Ronald. I know Ronald, I'm comfortable with him. And then, of course, what do we always say? Sometimes we don't expect it. We underestimate our children. And bold came out ECD. Ruth Lucas, our CES for ECD, please introduce Dr. Eve.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Karen. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marlene Wasserman. She's founder of the Dr. Eve brand. She's internationally trained by the American Association of Sex Educators, counselors, and therapists. I can't get over the introduction. Okay. Certified clinical sexologist and couple and sex therapist, sexual medicine consultant and therapist in private practice. So anybody can go. Okay. An academic, educator, author of 4 books, and well-known media celebrity. She has her own weekly live radio and television programs. But most importantly, she is stimulated and invested in a primary role of clinician. After many years, being an online expert, educator, and counselor to the youth throughout Africa, in 2013, Dr. Wasserman began research on online relationships, sexuality behavior, specifically cyber infidelity. In 2015, she globally launched a book called Cyber Infidelity, The New Seduction. Internationally, she represents papers at conferences and does professional training and public appearances on managing online behavior. She is a temporary advisor to the World Health Organization. In 2016, she expanded her role as a sexual health medico legal expert and certified medico legal mediator. Her current areas of clinical interests are hashtag cyber infidelity, hashtag modern love, and hashtag intimacy trauma. You may find Dr. Eve, and I'm sure many of us will be, on www.dreve.co.za. I have to end by saying, Dr. Eve, your topic today, how language in its different formats impacts on how learners and teachers socialize around sexuality. Please welcome, I'm welcoming you, and please come to the stage to really enthrall us with your vast knowledge. Thank you.
Yo, I don't think we should talk about this.
Everyone stand up.
Come on. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all of the things, talk about things that maybe.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about sex.
Please feel free to move.
Let's talk about sex.
Let's talk about sex for now. To the people at home or in the crowd, it keeps coming up anyhow. Don't decoy, avoid, or make void the topic. Cause that ain't gonna stop it. Now we talk about sex on the radio and video shows. Many will know anything goes. Let's tell it like it is and how it could be. How it was and of course how it should be. Those who think it's dirty have a choice.
Okay, enough with the music.
Will that stop us, Ken? I doubt. Alright then, come on, spin.
Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex.
Well done. Can I have the two people who were afraid to introduce me come up quickly? I would love to meet them. Come on, come on. So, I'm Marlene. Please introduce yourself.
Ibrahim.
Hello, Ibrahim. How do you do?
Almarit.
Elmarie, how do you do? We have a choice of either having you stand here and get a full-on education, or are you going to be more comfortable sitting?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to be comfortable sitting. So, Abraham and Elmarie, take a breath. Take a breath. Let's all take a breath. So this is what we do with our children as they enter into the classroom. We get them to breathe so that they can be present with us. We want a short intake breath, seriously, just short intake breath and a long exhale. Do another one. And exhale. Now you can go and sit down because you're more relaxed. I'm going to be disruptive and move around and not really do the topic that Ismail asked me to do. I just want to give you a little bit of history of how I know Ismail and how I got to be up on this stage. There he is. He heard me talking about, it was last year sometime, 2018 sometime, and we kind of got excited around, I was very passionate about education and what was going on and not going on in the schools. And we got together, had a few meetings, and he introduced me into the curriculum management team in Johannesburg. So I spent a number of months working on the curriculum development and being the consultant for the textbook. So you're going to have my work in your textbook, the life orientation textbook. I consulted with the writers on the thread on sexuality. So I'm very familiar with the curriculum, what the intention is for the 2020 curriculum, and was very proud and very, very excited to be part of that and leave my legacy in terms of what I think that kids should be learning in this thread. Let's move into who our learners are. And I want to just reassure you, those who are feeling nervous or maybe you're going to be disappointed, I'm not here to talk about sex. The life orientation teachers do that. And I know that you're wondering, what am I doing here, because you teach maths and English and history and creative arts and biology, and what has that got to do with sexuality? And I'm hoping that you're going to leave here knowing it has everything to do with sexuality, that you hold the key to your learners being able to have healthy sexual lives, which is what our intention is. So who are these learners who sit in front of you, irrespective of what their ages are? They mostly are lonely, isolated, afraid. They also are coming from disrupted families. 1 out of 3 of those girls have been sexually violated before the age of 12. 1 out of 5 of those boys have been sexually violated. So in essence, you have a child sitting in front of you. He is traumatized. And you know what happens to the brain with trauma, especially with what's called childhood developmental trauma disorder. Those brains rewire, and those brains are reactive and hyper alert 24/7. They're alert to you, to every move you make, to every word that you say, to every cue that you give them. They are alert because they live in so much fear. So you're dealing with a traumatized child every day. This is the in real life world, because the kids that we're dealing with have got 2 lives, just like we have. They have an in real life world and they have a digital world. Their digital world is highly sexualized. Their digital world consists of porn, not because they're on Pornhub or downloading porn. It's because 30% of social media that they are exposed to contains some form of sexuality. The video games that they're exposed to contains violence and sexuality. The chat rooms that they enter, the sexting that they're doing, is all about sexuality. Whether they like it or not, they are exposed to sexuality. Their primary social connection is online. What disturbed me about that video that we just saw was there was no social connection. It was only at the very end that we saw them kind of moving out of their robotic states and interacting. Now, interesting, tonight I'm doing a live art installation in Stellenbosch. I was invited by an artist to come and do this, and it's about intimacy and loneliness, how we have sex with things rather than with people. And in my research for this event tonight, I have been astounded to learn the importance of social connection. And you sit in a place where these kids are not socially connecting with each other in real life, but rather online. And what we have to do is to encourage social connection in the classroom without a digital world because of the health implications, which are horrific. What are our lives like? What are your lives like? What are your in real life lives like? Well, you're socially disconnected. You're lonely. You're isolated. You're afraid. You come from disrupted families, or you're living in a disrupted family yourself. You might have been a victim of childhood sexual abuse, and therefore you may be traumatized as well. Your body language, your gestures, your facial expression is going to tell that child everything that they need to know about how safe they feel with you. People who've been traumatized feel unsafe in the world. And what they most need is to feel somebody's watching my back and I'm safe. And school becomes a place where they feel safe. School becomes a place where they turn to you because of the family disruption to have a sense of connection. Intimacy is about connection. Sex, in out, not really interesting, right? Orgasm, no, orgasm, not really interesting. What is interesting is how we feel and how we connect. And you are the point of connection for these children. So you have an obligation to think sexually and intimately and be hyper alert to the world of your children, which means that you have to start with the responsibility of being hyper alert to your own sexuality. It is amazing how just from looking, and that's why I brought up the two people, thank you for that, to see the terror, the fear, the anxiety, the judgment, the prejudice that you hold that the kids are going to pick up, whether they're talking about sexuality in your class or not. They have an understanding of your intimacy level. There's been research around doctors and patients. Because I work so much and teach at UCT medical students around how to engage with patients around their sexual health. So what the research shows is that a patient will look at the face of the doctor, and depending on what they see on the face of the doctor, they will or they will not talk to the doctor about what they're really concerned about. After any kind of medical intervention, pharmaceutical intervention, they want to know about how they have been sexually impacted. And what the research shows is if the doctor is smiley, friendly, confident, the patient feels comfortable to ask I've had a prostate removal, I've had a prostatectomy. What does that mean? Am I going to be able to have an erection? Will I be able to ejaculate again? They feel comfortable. If they see that they begin to raise the topic with the doctor and the doctor becomes uncomfortable, fidgets, just becomes quite giggly, embarrassed, they shut down and they do not ask the question. If they see on the face, the gesture, the posture of that doctor is rigid, unavailable, disconnected, not eye-gazing, not socially connecting, they will not talk to that doctor about something that has enormous implications for their well-being and quality of life, their sexuality. And I'm going to transpose that into the classroom, even though I don't have research around that. That the way that you present yourself as a sexual person, and that doesn't mean, and you should not be sharing your private sexual life with your learners. We know how we feel, or you should know how you feel, in terms of your own sexuality, your own body, your own comfortability with yourself. And I encourage you to think about your own sexuality, your own comfortability, because that's what you're going to be presenting as person to your class. Think about your own self-identity. Have you got a self-identity? Because self-identities are fluid, they're not fixed. How do you present yourself as a person? Think about your learners, and you're really challenged today, especially with these 2020 learners. My grandchild just started grade R today, well, last week. They're digital natives. I feel sorry for a teacher. It's like, really, this is a child very different to her parents, to me. These are children who have got choices that we never ever had. They can identify as anything they want. There is no more a binary model of I'm male or female. She may be, or he may be, or they may be. We no longer in the classroom talk about he, she. We talk about he, she, they. We give our children an opportunity to self-identify, which means that you have to have a very fixed idea of what your self-identity is. Their sexual orientation is fluid. You're going to find them kissing in the bathroom girl to girl, which is in fact the most common form of sexual behavior right now. Girls are kissing girls before they're kissing boys. And they don't self-identify as being lesbian. They self-identify as being non-binary, fluid people. They don't want to have a name. You've got to think about it in your classes, how you talk to them. It isn't he, she. You want to check in with them out of respect. How do you want to be called? What do I call you? He, she, they. What pronoun do you want to use? They're going to demand it. Language in every single classroom is what you've got to be aware of. Your task, I repeat, is to be comfortable with your own self, to check in where your blocks are, how you present yourself. What is your own identity? What are the obstacles that you may be having working in an environment where you are so challenged with children who are so traumatized, sexualized, and keen to know more? Keen to know more. Think about the brain of this adolescent child who is beginning to feel, identify who they are in the world, and they do it through social connections and online. Their brains are geared just like our brains were geared. No one can change that, to be experimental, adventurous, risk-taking, curious. That's what they are. We cannot punish them for that. They're confused. I had a mother recently who made an appointment in my private practice to come and see me. She was absolutely shaken. A few days before that, she had learned from her daughter. Daughter had disclosed to her, daughter is 12 years old, that every time she goes to her best friend to play, their newest game is going through the mother's mobile phone. The mobile phone is there, there's no password on it, and the child has access to it. The mother said, sure, you can use it to watch Netflix, to download videos, to play your games. But the mother just forgot that her WhatsApp is on that as well. And these girls have had weeks reading and looking at the single mother's WhatsApp. That's how they've become sexually educated and terrified. They've been seeing dick pics, pictures of this woman's body, pictures of her being sexual, sexting, language. They're confused, and it's become a game for them to be invading this mother's space. And when her daughter told her, she knew she had to take action, and she didn't know what to do around the situation, how to talk to it, what to do about it. So part of your responsibility is to be aware of what you're doing online. Research is showing us that children are feeling neglected because you're absorbed in your digital world. You are not giving them attention because you're coming home and you're online, watching news, reading up, chatting on dating sites, whatever you're doing, watching porn, and you're not present with your children. So how do we educate children? How do we bring them into a place of having cyber health and health in their real worlds? How can you, in your different curriculum, in your different subject matters, make a difference? First thing is recognizing that this is part of what you need to do. If not directly talking to the subject of sexuality, but being aware that you have a responsibility to gear them up to be healthy sexual individuals. It doesn't take information. They will get that information in life orientation. It requires a certain attitude and language and presentation from you. You cannot be sexually ignorant. You cannot be prejudicial and judgmental. If you have an issue with girls kissing girls, if you have an issue with people transitioning, anyone on the LGBTIQ continuum, that's work you have to do, because you're going to have those kids in your class. 10% of them are non-heteronormative. Your work is to get rid of your prejudices and your judgments. Your work is to be completely aware of the language that you're using. And I don't care if you're teaching maths, English, history, or biology. The kids with those traumatized brains pick up on the nuances of the innuendos, of when you talk about morphes, or you put gays down, or when you are deriding or prejudicing or marginalizing kids from single homes. They pick it up in your language that you're using and the tone of voice, and again, your face, your gestures, and your presentation. How do we teach it? What can you do? Every single one of you. And it was raised now in the beautiful previous presentation. We teach children, you teach children, critical thinking. That's what sexuality education is about. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. It's critical thinking that they can apply when they are in difficult situations sexually. Not only in a maths problem or a history conundrum, in any subject. Critical thinking is what's going to be the tool to help the child when they're in a difficult situation and they don't know what to do. They need to have skills to be able to make good decisions so that they can be healthy sexual individuals. There's a piece of research that came out that showed that children who are sexually informed, who have an ability to think critically and have sexual information, positive sexual information, they are able to ward off sexual abuse. They need problem solving. I heard you saying, wonderful, complex problem solving. Whatever class that you're in, giving them the ability to complexly think and problem solve. Use examples from their real world. If you're in a situation and you really like this guy and you're not sure if he's crushing on you or his best friend, what are you going to do about it? Use examples from their world, which is about, they are completely preoccupied with love, relationships, sexuality, family dramas, rape, incest. This is their world. Use those examples in whatever you're doing. Get them to think and solve the problems. The next thing that you have to do, which we know grows healthy sexual individuals, is building their self-esteem, making them feel worthwhile. And we do that with what's called positivity language. All the time, complimenting, all the time, telling them how special they are. Young girls go and look for blessers because they want to feel special. Make them feel special. Make them feel worthy in your classroom. One of the biggest problems in their digital world is that they're striving for something called perfection. They live on Instagram. Facebook is old school. They live on Instagram, and the pressure there to look a certain way pushes kids into depression, loneliness, anxiety. The kids of today have got the highest level of interconnectivity that they've ever had, that anyone's ever had in any time. And they also have the highest incidence of suicide, depression, and loneliness. So they're hyper-connected and they're hyper-depressed and lonely. They're posting themselves to Instagram because they're wanting self-esteem, confidence, affirmation, and feeling special. You can do that in a classroom with them, whatever subject you're teaching, rewarding them, making them feel as if they are special. That's what everybody wants to feel. So it's critical thinking, problem solving, self-esteem. Then most importantly, what you can do is to create boundaries. Simple things. Those boundaries extend and help them feel, I have a right to say no. When I'm in a situation and I'm uncomfortable and I don't know what to do, and my brain is on fire and I can't critically think my way through this. You'll see through the curriculum I've included a lot of somatic work. How do I feel in my gut? How do I feel in my body? It doesn't feel right. Give them the language to be able to say no. No, it doesn't feel right that you're pushing me in a corner and this is what you want to do. I had a young woman this week who consulted with me. She's 20 years old now. And she, at the age of 14, was in a relationship with a boy who she was madly in love with and thought that he was madly in love with her. And it's something really important. Please honor their love relationships. Please honor. Don't separate them and say this is bad for you. Of course they're in love. Of course you want to do that. You want to teach them how to think about it and how to solve the problems that they have in those situations and watch out for signs of abuse because there's an incredibly high incidence of teenage dating violence. So she was in this relationship with this boy, and she got drunk, which is what they do at that age, part of the experimentation. And the next thing, she kind of woke up, and there was her boyfriend on top of her, penetrating her. And she vomited. That's what the brain does. I'm so traumatized. She just vomited. And she then was so shameful that she hadn't said no. And she couldn't because she was drunk. And that's an absolute violation. Anyone who's drunk, you don't go near them. That she kept quiet and she continued to be in a relationship with this boy and kept having sex with him for 6 months. And 4 years later, realized, now that she's at university, she cannot have a sexual relationship. She cannot have intimacy. And she wants to be able to free herself of this burden of this rape and talk to somebody about it. Teach them boundaries. Don't punish them for alcohol. Of course they want to drink. Of course they're going to smoke marijuana, which is now legal. Teach them how to do it healthily. The most important thing that you want to teach these kids is something called values. And this is a big thread that runs through the curriculum. What are the values? And you have them. You've got them all there. These are the values that are going to be threaded through the curriculum for their many years at school. Those are the values. What are your values? Respect, honesty, trust, commitment. Perhaps you feel that a value is if only somebody is loving to you, do you give sexual exchanges? Maybe you have a value that only if I'm married, I should be having sexual activity. Maybe you have a value that says it's fine to be hooking up as long as you're using condoms. You have to have values because you cannot judge that child without giving them a value of what's called healthy sexual behavior. Risk-taking, condom using, those are things that just put them at risk. Teach them the value of self-love, respect, trust, and boundaries. Very importantly today, you want to integrate consent into your language. Very important. Consent comes from simple things from when they're real young. Do you want to have this person as your friend? Is this consensual? Is this something which is reciprocated? Does it feel in your gut comfortable that this person can be my friend? Is this something that I value, someone I value? Do I feel valued by this person? Totally important. Consent. Do I want to go and play with this person this afternoon or don't I? That's a critical thinking. Well, let's solve the problem. Why do you, why don't you? Actually, in my gut, I don't feel as if I'm safe in that person's house because the dad looks at me funny. Well, you don't go play there. It's about consent in the classroom. Do you consent to share homework, to do homework, to share a desk? Use it in your classrooms all the time. The boundaries and consent are important. And then as you raise the gender issue, number one, always on my list, you have so much influence in the classroom. Your stance, your gesture, your posture, your language. How are you discriminating or are you treating them as equals? Boys, girls, and non-gender binary, non-binary gender people. Are you ensuring that there is equality, that you are not preferring or doing traditional stereotypical tasks to boys, to girls, and to non-binary people? It's a very strong message that you are giving to them in terms of respecting each other, having trust with each other, feeling safe, feeling confident, feeling seen and special. Those are the basic 101s of what you need to do to be able to make your children sexually healthy and safe without having to talk about sex. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, could we please put our hands together for the most important discussion which follows our theme, Year of the Learner, and how we engage. I'm going to ask Mr. Ismail Taladia to please present a token of appreciation to Dr. E for sharing with us and how we impact on the lives of our learners. And Dr. Eve will be around for the rest of the day. We'll also be in the life orientation room. So Leslie Pearson, don't forget your ECD. Don't go to the life orientation room, Leslie. Just thought I'd mention that. I'm teasing her now, Doc. And so thank you so much, because very often we are bound by our own beliefs and we want to be judgmental. Very often when my son comes home from school with a letter, and for those of you who know me, I get a letter that Crystal, the teacher, sends home with the school, and I have to fill in the latest information. And the information is, because he's now at high school, mother, father. What do, Siki? I scratch out the father part and I put parent 1 and parent 2. Because my son has 2 moms. He does not have a mother and a father. And so I've engaged the school in conversation, and very glad to say that there's been a turnaround and a mindset change, and the school has said to me, Corin, will you come in and let's have a discussion? And there were so many other parents that joined. And so thank you. That is how we're going to change without making children feel ashamed, because while you teach my child, you don't know my child has 2 moms. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the donation of sperm, but there is no dad. In that format, yes, and I say it most respectfully, but he's very proud of his 2 moms, and we love him to bits. So thank you so much for Dr. Eve. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really, I know we're running slightly behind time, but I cannot miss this opportunity. I really cannot miss this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. So bear with us for the next 15 minutes because we're really honored and privileged to have two guests with us this morning while in an array of duties running the Western Cape Education Department, taking us to a new vision, opening out barriers, allowing, disrupting education, making sure that our learners are at the forefront, making sure our teachers are at the forefront, and bringing about change. I'd like to welcome two guests here this morning, Ms. Warda Conrad, the Director of Business Strategy and Stakeholder Management, and you saw Dr. Peter Barnard here yesterday. Those are one of the projects of Ms. Warda Conrad. Warda, could you just stand so the audience could acknowledge you? And then, ladies and gentlemen, our very special guest. Now, don't scratch my eyes out, ladies. I am, and I say this on every platform, I'm his special girl. So eat your heart out, ladies. Could you please rise and honor and welcome our Head of Education, Mr. Brian Schroeder.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Karen, you might think that you're the very special lady in my life, but what about parent two? Both of them are very special. So you got to share a little bit there sometimes. Huh? I don't intend taking 15 minutes, but I probably will, because first of all, I want to say to you, thank you for being here for these 2 days. Thank you for giving your time. And why do you do it? Is it to get out of your job? Is it to have a comfortable, nice venue at the sea? You see these beautiful pics and you don't often see that? That might be a reason. I'd like to believe that there's a deeper reason why you're here. And I would like to believe that that deeper reason is because you actually are here because you want to grow and you want to continue to learn and you want to share, because of the fact that we're in a job that needs great wisdom and that needs to renew and to grow all the time. We are in the job of preparing young people for their future, and it's a tough job. And so I just want to share one or two things very briefly. Thank you also for the comments that we just had. I hope that it had been recorded, and I hope that we had swiped it to be able to, without any additional cost, share a video of the presentation with teachers, because I wish the teachers could also hear that comment. I know that not everyone will agree, with every aspect of it, but the fundamental underpinning tenets our teachers have to know. And I'll tell you why. Because what we're busy doing at the moment is talking about learning. We introduced the third theme in our 3-year theme this year, the Year of the Learner. Why? Not so that learners can have rights and that we celebrate their rights, but we have it because we need to start focusing on the learner and learning and everything that goes along with that. In a large organization such as this, 34,000 teachers, 1.2 million learners, it's a huge organization. Are we having the impact we want? And right at the beginning, Dr. Eve said something that triggered my thinking. And that was around the issue that she was speaking about learners traumatized, sometimes because of their interrelated social and sexual relationships that they have. But so many of our learners, I would argue 70% or more, maybe 80%, come from traumatized environments. And we're not talking the obvious ones of violence and crime and joblessness and poverty and gangsterism and shooting. That contributes a significant part of it. But don't think that affluent kids living in leafy subjects do not have trauma. And let me tell you, do not think that you sit here today, all of you, probably pre-94 born. I don't see many millennials amongst us at the moment. And we need to bring a couple in. We do. We need to bring, yeah, thank you, Gafisa. Fact of the matter is that if you come from a previous era, pre-94, you have suffered trauma. And you are living that trauma, and your kids are still experiencing those issues. So the fact of the matter is we have to think about learners. And as we were sitting there, Wanda said to me, a lot of the comments that were being made is absolutely supporting and dovetailing why we are talking about getting learners to have a positive growth mindset. Our learners come to school not to learn. It's not their primary priority. Our learners come to school for all kinds of other reasons. They have sex behind the tuck shop. They come for the free food we give them. They come to sell dachab, to buy maruan. There are all kinds of other reasons. They sometimes come for validation. And our teachers are not understanding that fully and properly as a group and as a cohort. And our teachers are not millennials either, generally. And so they come from an era which is very different. And so we need to change the mindsets of teachers. And so when I speak to you about transform to perform strategy, it's a far deeper underlying issue of doing 4 things in our 4 programs. One is we've got to get learners' mindsets right. They must understand why they go to school. They must want to. And for that, they need to be safe. They need to have an engagement that's positive with teachers. Secondly, we need to change the teachers' mindsets, because our teachers have to again start understanding the 21st century child, not the 19th century child. They need to understand how kids learn. They need to understand their trauma. They need to understand the challenges. And the conversations that are there have to change. And so our teachers must again believe in kids, love kids, and want to accompany kids on a learning journey instead of pouring curriculum content into their heads. Are you listening to what I'm saying? So growth mindset for kids, getting teachers to think differently about what they're doing. And thirdly, we've got to get values into our system and not impose those values, but create values conversations where people are starting to think values, where kids start forming their own values. I think in the previous conversation you said something about it doesn't feel right. That's a values judgment. And so we've got to create the values, because if we don't, our society's values have gone to pot. And education has to do something in the school so that eventually it spills over into the school community and eventually into society. It's a hell of a job our teachers have. And the 4th program, of course, in the Transform to Perform strategy is developing leadership at all levels. You guys are part of that. Now, the reason I couldn't be at the beginning, was it yesterday that you started or today? I think yesterday. Well, I couldn't be here is because of the first time after long time struggle, broad management is on the Ethos Leadership Program. Who of you have been on that program? Quite a significant number of you. Now, I want to tell you all of you are going to go. It might take a year or 2 to get everyone through there. But developing leadership at all levels, including the most key leaders in the education environment in the Western Cape, namely school leaders, is critical. It's also working with our own minds. It's working with our own understanding as leading education. And so those 4 programs are quite critical. But to get back a little bit more directly to your job as subject advisors and curriculum planners. Guys, I want to ask you, whilst you all have an important role to play in supporting teachers to develop your curricula and your subject material, we've got to do something underpinningly fundamental. We've got to make learning fun again. Kids must want to go to school to learn. Enter to learn, leave to serve. Part of the growth mindset, part of a future, part of validation of kids, part of saying to them that they're there because they are busy preparing and growing for their own future. It's a hell of a job. But we've got to draw them, therefore, to learning. And therefore, we've got to make learning fun. And not only in primary schools. Of course, the level of fun changes and the level of importance changes. But let's get fun learning back into our classes. And if there's one thing I want you to do as subject advisors in all our districts, it's building on one of the 3 things I've asked districts to focus on this year. I hope all of you know it by this time. Who knows the 3 things I've asked districts to focus on this year? So I asked the question because I'm going to, can one say, let's not say club, let's say I'm going to have deep conversations with district directors. Because I've shared that already, and if the subject advisors don't know what those 3 functionalities are, and it's the end of January, woe is me. In fact, woe is them. So let me just say, I've asked districts to focus on three things. The first one is, I'm going to hold them accountable to ensure that every school is a functional organization. Nowhere can you have good learning taking place where we care for kids and lead them into a great future if the school is dysfunctional. Leadership, principle, whatever it is, there aren't structures in the school. It's a pathetic place. It's dirty. That's a dysfunctional school, and I'm going to hold districts accountable for it, and primarily circuit managers. The second thing I want districts to focus on is making sure that good teaching and learning happens where? In every classroom, in every school in the province. Part of our vision. We're not going to get quality education if we don't get that right. So for that, I'm going to charge subject advisors. I want you in schools ensuring that quality teaching and learning is happening. In fact, the focus in 2019, the year of the learner, I actually want on learning in the classroom. And the teacher's key in that process of ensuring quality learning. Of course, many parties come to the fore, but at the moment our teachers are, in a sense, often all over the place. They're traumatized, they too are traumatized. So you must make sure that all the enablers are in place for them to do that. And part of that is creating an enabling environment in every class. I will hold you to account. If I come into a classroom and I can't see in that classroom what subject is being taught, because that's not a conducive learning environment. It's got to smell the subject. It's got to smell foundation phase. It's got to smell the reading and the counting and the mathematics or the geography or the human sciences or the arts and culture. And so I really want you to focus this year on ensuring that there's a climate created. Help the teachers to know the content, help them to have great methodology, 21st century methodology, utilizing technology. That's your job as subject advisors. And I want to really appeal to you to make sure that you contribute to that requirement. The third one is ensuring that we have enabling governance and not disabling governance, as unfortunately we have in some schools. And that is not primarily your job, that's the job of the circuit manager and our own role in dealing with that nonsense if it's there. So guys, I hope that when you leave, that you don't just leave being inspired because of the conversations that you've had here for 2 days. I hope that you go away with a recommitment to understanding what large thing we're busy with. Not the burden that we face, but that we are part of a big program, a decade-long shift in education in this province, a decade-long shift, focusing on transforming so that our learners are able to perform. And your role in that and your part in that is absolutely critical. And I hope you leave understanding that. Your role has changed from just being a subject peddler, if you like, with ensuring that there's compliance to how many assessments, when it's done. We've got to concentrate on the learner and learning. And where compliance is required because there's nothing happening, you've got to do that. But where it's required that you shift the compliance so that the focus is on learning and not on compliance and checklists, you have to do that. And I expect subject advisors to be able to have that discerning ability to do that. I place a great burden and a great expectation on you. And I'd love to see you blossom in 2019 in taking this challenge and in taking real learning forward so that we don't focus just on the challenges and the negative and the burdens, but that we move forward in a way that really focuses on learning in every subject. And the final comment I just want to make is the reality that we cannot continue only focusing on foundational learning, reading, writing, and counting. It's absolutely essential because foundational learning is foundational. We've got to get that right. We've got to continue on that route. And as EXCO visits every district from the beginning of February, we will speak about those issues and how we manage that space with the district leadership. That, I think, is important. But that alone, I don't think, is what we really expect of us all to do. So going forward in this year, and I think it's quite critical that you go away here with great enthusiasm, inspired again. But it is of little value if you go home with a lied in your heart and you get home and you don't do anything different or you don't do anything about it. Then these sessions are useless and a waste of time and money and people's energy. Go away inspired, but go away thinking about 3 or 5 things that you're going to do differently in understanding the big picture that you are part of and critical to. Thanks for the work that you do. Thanks for the fact that you've taken these jobs to in fact make a difference. And Karen, you and your team, thank you for this fantastic opportunity and engagement. It is, I think, overdue that we have the conversations that start enriching us and that start evolving us and helping us all to grow. Thanks. Great further to you.
Thank you so much, SG. Have you noticed how refined I've become, Jonathan? Even my walk has changed. No, I'm teasing. But SG, thank you once again. And colleagues, for you who work in the districts, we work at head office. And what a pleasant atmosphere. I've been in this job for 32 years. And if somebody had to say to me, Ms. Conrad, would you ever work at head office? My answer was emphatically no. And the nickname used to be the Grys Paleis and all different things. But you know, since our head of education has come there, and I say this very proudly, the way education, the atmosphere has changed, the vision has changed. Teachers feel free to be able to come forward without being punished, being criticized, being ridiculed, because they know that there is a platform for someone to listen to them. There's empathy. They know also, ladies and gentlemen, with that comes accountability. They also know that some of them have wanted to break free, but have not been allowed to. But with our head of education, he's opened the pathways. He's opened the pathways, Jamie, as you said, for creativity, for collaboration, for a change in language, Dr. Eve. And that has enriched our lives. And that is what we're saying. When these meetings take place, ladies and gentlemen, we have an attitude, we embrace that we feel proud to serve the WCD, that we are servant leaders, that we go out there, that we use a spirit of discernment as to when we need to be punitive, when accountability needs to come in, but also when we need to be supportive, Wayne, and when we need to be empathetic at the same time. So it's quite a conglomerate of personalities that need to be taken, as well as how you upskill when you go to those various teachers, workshops, and that's what it's all about. It's about creating a future for our learners with the Year of the Learner. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask that you just take a 20-minute tea break and not the 30 minutes and hastily go to your rooms. But before we do that, I'm also going to ask that please respect the time in your room, that the time for today is 1600 hours. And so the facilitators, I've engaged with them, so except those from the Eden Karoo, Mrs. Mariki Bucas has made a special arrangement. But ladies and gentlemen, if you were in the office, you'd be working till 1600 hours, so we will respect the time. And I will be coming around to the various rooms, and now I have to put on my rather punitive hat. And so while we engage in this, I'm going to ask that we play our song, our theme song, SGEs, that we rise, that we commit. And so I'm going to ask that we stand, ladies and gentlemen, and that we recommit ourselves. Could we please stand? Let's get up, curriculum. Come on, let's get up, let's get up. Come on, let's move this. All right, let's say, I'll rise. Come on, put your hand up on your heart. Do you commit? Commit to serve this province. Commit to serve our teachers. Commit to make sure we have quality education in our lifetime. And so Hussein say, Hussein Mulaji, I commit. Karen Dudley, I commit. Ibrahim Peck, I commit. Hafisa, I commit. Warda Conrad, I commit. Charmaine Peterson, I commit. Natasha Esbach, I commit. Portia, I commit. Head of Education, Brian Schroeder, I commit. Let's rise up, ladies and gentlemen. Let's rise up.
The silence is it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We now declare this session closed. Be blessed, serve our teachers, serve our learners with pride. Thank you.
But I promise we would take the world to its feet. Mountains, bring it to its feet.